Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So you were more than right. You were. I think I would put you at like
I don't know,
150%
dude.
right.
I don't know. Yeah, some companion. I think a whole lot of the world got it right that companions are going to start getting banned. Obviously, Zirda in Legacy we talked about already. It was just too broken with cards with untap abilities, most notably Basalt Monolith and Grim Monolith. And then obviously Lurrus is banned in two formats so far, both Vintage and Legacy. And interestingly, it's kind of an unprecedented move. But Mark Rosewater, actually posted on his blog a question somebody was asking about the companion mechanic. And Rosewater's response made it clear that they're willing to, like, it's something that they're exploring very deeply right now, lots of different options, and nothing's off the table, including potentially changing how the mechanic works.
Wow, that would
Which
be
is,
something else, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, they've never done something like that, you know?
well, it's all it's printed on the card a certain way. Cards, I should say. The thing that's amazing to me about the banning in Vintage, in particular, is usually Vintage restricts cards in order to kind of contain their brokenness, but that just doesn't work with companions.
Well, so it's weird because, okay, this is the first time that Vintage has had a power level ban since 1996 when Mind Twist and Channel were, there was a brief period where Mind Twist and Channel, not that brief, but there was a period where Mind Twist and Channel were banned for power level reasons. But now Lurrus is back and bringing it back. But the thing that's weird to me is it's confusing to me why, I guess, you see, it seems to me like it would be so much better to just ban Lurrus as a companion. But I guess the reason to not do that is because it introduces more complexity. And if you're just going to change the rules anyway, which maybe they will, but if they end up just changing the rules, then they can just take Lurrus off the ban list or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense because they must have taken Mind Twist and Channel off the ban list, right?
Yeah, back in the 90s.
When they just changed to the restricted list as a thing that you can do.
Yeah, well, in 96, so in 95, Mind Twist and Channel got banned, but in 96 they kind of changed the philosophy a little bit, and they're like, we really shouldn't just ban cards. But here we are, you know.
Zirda, I thought, was a really, I mean, not that it's not understandable. Totally understandable. When you walked me through that kind of Grim Monolith implementation with Zirda, I was just like, well, that just seems like on the third turn you would win a lot of the time. And you're like, well,
and sometimes sooner.
That's just how it works. Like, if you draw a Grim Monolith in a third land, they're dead. Like, oh, well, that's clever. Actually, you don't even need a third land, right? You could just float the Monolith mana. Right, so that's really bad. But the thing that was super interesting to me is, like, it wasn't even that prevalent of a strategy yet. They were just like, they just saw the writing on the wall, and they were like, yeah, this is going to be a problem.
Well, they did say that its win rate was absurd. Its popularity wasn't that high because they thought that Lurrus was suppressing its popularity.
Yeah.
But its actual win rate was disproportionately high anyway. And they thought that with Lurrus out of the way, that it would quickly rise to take its place if they didn't preemptively take action.
One of the problems, I think, with the format going forward is probably you could just mulligan to a Grim Monolith, and it would be very, very bad problems for your opponent. That's a very abusive use of the current mulligan rules, just to automatically win on the third turn.
Yeah, I do. Or sooner, because there's stuff like in Legacy, Ancient Tomb and City Traders, all those type of deals. But man, I wonder. I'm here for it with Zirda in Vintage. I mean, why not? Why, like, I don't know, man. That just seems like, I mean, once you're not allowed to play Lurrus, Zirda might just be sick.
Yeah, it's just like LeBron James always used to say, next man up. Yep. Somebody tweaks his knee, next man up. So, Zirda, you'll have a brief moment to shine like Oko, and that'll be it. You remember Oko? That was so long ago.
Dude, Oko's busted in Vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's wild is the growing list of restricted planeswalkers in Vintage, and Oko isn't even on it yet. How funny is it that Oko's not on it? And like, if you were going to ask people to make a list of which ones should be on here, the one that goes and wins automatically with Time Vault, like if you just have Time Vault in your deck, there's a planeswalker that just can win by itself. That one wouldn't even make people's top 10. OG Tezzeret, you know?
So expensive.
Yeah, well, therein lies the rub. So I think it's a good start at the very least. I don't think they banned too many companions. No. They did note, by the way, that the use of Yorion, like they insinuated that Yorion, basically they said that none of the companions had too high of a win rate in Standard, which is interesting because the general community sentiment seems to be extremely lopsided towards this Yorion deck. And whenever you look at all the results from all the tournaments, the challenges, it seems like the Yorion, the last few weeks, it's been this Luca Copperco Outcast version that we talked about last week.
Yeah,
you know?
the Jeskai version versus the Bant or other versions is really popular. And I think big part of that is just you've got this potential 1-card combo, semi 2-card combo with Luca Coppercoat Outcast, where you just pop Luca, and then you have one of your several ways to produce a creature that's not a creature card, right? Whether it's Castle Ardenvale, a Shark token, what have you, and then you can kind of go off and get an Agent of Treachery and get your opponent's gigantic Nightmare or whatever they've got if they're that kind of a player, or they're powerful permanent. So I think like there's just that really big incentive around Luca. And also, Luca makes your deck small in a way, right? Like, if you find a Luca, you find not only an Agent of Treachery, but the mana for an Agent of Treachery the same turn. And you've still got a Luca. So, I think it's a really, really strong... I don't even know how many card combo that's supposed to be. You're using more than one card.
It's so confusing when you're dealing with stuff like companions and cards coming out of your deck. And but they're... a lot of these decks are keeping it pretty tight. The winner from the most recent Standard Challenge actually had a little bit of a wrinkle. Talk to me about 3 copies of Solar Blaze.
Yeah, this is some spice, right? So this deck in a tournament, in kind of macro in the format, where there's a hugely disproportionate representation of these Yorion companion decks, right? 80 card decks that probably have Luca in them. The one that won, which was played by Kazanner 3000, ran 3 Solar Blaze. And Solar Blaze is cool. It's a powerful card. It's a 4-mana Wrath effect to go along with Shatter the Sky. Kind of weird, though, right? So Shatter the Sky, has the ability to kill anything. Solar Blaze, it's a lot narrower in terms of how it kills things, but it doesn't have the downside risk of them drawing a card. Is that like the main difference here?
Well, no. I mean, Solar Blaze also lets your Yorion live, right? Like,
and your Agent of Treachery. So that's
your Archon of Sun's Grace
out of the sideboard. Okay.
Yeah, which is not bad. I mean, Archon of Sun's Grace is exactly the type of card you want to sideboard in against people where you're keeping Solar Blaze.
Yeah, so that's actually really powerful, right? So typically, if you're going to utilize a creature to so you have a good creature, the opponent is forced to play multiple creatures to get past your creature, then you Wrath, then depending on how many creatures they deployed, you might not be generating card advantage. But in the case of Archon of Sun's Grace plus Solar Blaze, you Wrath, you kill two or so of their creatures, and you keep your creature. They again have to deploy multiple creatures just to get past the Archon of Sun's Grace. That's very clever.
Definitely. And like, I know the Birth of Meletus token is kind of like, it seems like it's not that big of a game, but like if you just have a 0/4 wall and it kind of accomplishes some of that effect you were just speaking of making them have to commit one more attacker, if you just sweep the board and get to keep a 0/4 against some of these red decks, that's like an awesome leg up. I'm into that. I like it. I do like having one shadow the sky is a safe, something you can dig to that gives you just an extra angle. But I'm into it. I'm here for the Solar Blaze. Plus, I mean, your mana is pretty decent. But, you could do worse than just having a slightly easier to cast Wrath.
Yeah, I actually, just based on the interactions with Birth of Meletis, Agent of Treachery, and Arcana Sun's Grace, like you point out, I'm liking this Solar Blaze now.
Yeah, I think it's a smart move.
Shadow to the Sky to me.
Yeah, like I do think one Shadow to the Sky gives you a dimension, because you know what I mean? Like when the game stretches, the difference between drawing multiple Solar Blazes versus you have one Shadow to the Sky, because you're going to face that occasional opponent who just has like a bunch of stuff that doesn't die to Solar Blaze. But like I like this move.
Like any Solar Blaze is pretty dismal in the mirror, right? Like,
dude, how do you feel about the Commence the Endgame sideboard?
You know how I feel about Commence the Endgame.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because you know how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I was way more excited about it before cards like Shark Typhoon got printed. I mean, like, Commence the Endgame is pretty bad compared to Shark Typhoon. I mean, I guess it's extra Shark Typhoons. The thing that's kind of weird is clearly you would be bringing this in a matchup like the Mirror, for example. It gives you a good setup that they can't counter. But I'm always like a little wary about these cards that give them something to do with their Teferi. Oh, by the way, most of the text on this is a little obviated by opposing Teferis. So I'm very medium on the Commence the End game to get to the end of the statement. I always like that card to begin with, but I think that if it had a window, that window is not open anymore. Also, I would point out when I won a qualifier at the end of last year, I played the perfect deck for Commence the End game, and I was just like, you know what, this card is not nearly as good as just playing Cavalier of Thorns.
No.
So, the Cavalier of Thorns typically made a bigger guy, drew just as many cards, and cost less mana.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have trouble wanting to sideboard in 6 drops anyway, to say nothing of 6 drops that are weaker than all your 5s.
Wow. Yeah, that's... You know what is kind of good about Commence the End game? Like, you can't beat it up with an Elspeth Conquers Death. Problem is, it gets really beat up by, like, everything else. Right? Like, everything else just... I mean, Teferi laughs off this card.
Yeah. What did you think of, as the resident mono red aficionado, what did you think of the third place list with 4 copies of Heraldic Banner to help get you to Obosh? That's a piece of tech that we talked about, like a month ago, and it looks like it's swung back in this time in the form of actual mono red deck as opposed to Rakdos.
I love it here. I actually think that it is outstanding in the mono red deck. Probably even better than it was in the Rakdos deck. And there are a couple reasons. One, you have like multiple possible implementations of Heraldic Banner, right? Like, so there's like the weird dream, which is like 3rd turn Banner, 4th turn Obosh. Okay, like that kind of fits together. So the 3 to 5 jump is cool. But what is really interesting here is actually the 3 to 1. So on turn 3,
I was thinking the same thing.
You play Banner, and then you tap the Banner for R, and then you deploy a Dodger or a Fervent Champion, and you're literally getting in for like 2 haste, right? It could be, and if you already had a champion, like it's even more damage than that. So
I mean, even light up the stage, right?
Yeah, that's not bad.
Definitely, because you got on your next turn, you'll have extra mana to play all your cards. So
yeah, that's actually really substantial. This deck has a ton of 1-drops. It has Fervent Champion, Grim Initiate, Scorch Spitter, and Tin Street Dodger. So the 3 to 1 drop is actually really good in a bunch of those spots. It's a small thing. I would probably want to play a 4th Shock in this deck because the 3 to 1 opening up the Shock is actually really good. So if you have like any guys that you played on turn 1 and turn 2, you can buff them with the Banner and then still have Shock mana open. That's a really good combo. Big fan of it. And then I think the really, really awesome things are evasion creatures like Tin Street Dodger and Phoenix of Ash are just getting just outsized value out of Heraldic Banner. The one who's really getting value is Annex, right? So Annex is all your guys are getting pumped, right? So when guys die, you might be getting a little more juice out of them, but then each of those satyrs, right? Aren't they red creatures? Right? So
Yeah.
like you're crusading the satyrs. Like all that stuff. Like I think like Banner was good in Rakdos. I think it's fantastic here.
Well, and interesting, remember the banner, unlike some of these related cards in the past, it's not legendary or anything.
Yeah.
So like once you get the second one down, suddenly you're doing stuff like having Fervent Champion or Phoenix of Ash potentially triggering the bonus, the power up ability like you were alluding to with Annex.
Yep, absolutely.
But getting the second token.
Oh, I mean, just like multiple banners in Annex, for example, is
or even just Castle Embereth,
Oh, it's not bad. Yeah, all of that's really good. I think that one of the things I was a little down on when the companions started to take off, which was immediately, right, was that there wasn't going to be a viable mono red deck because I thought Lurrus was just so good, right? Like it's lifelink. Mono red deck is mostly a bunch of small, crappy creatures. You get in an attrition battle and they're just going to get drowned, especially when the opponent's free companion is lifelink. But I think that just stringing a lot of these cards together, the banner making all these otherwise not particularly impressive cards much more impressive, jumping 3 to 5 for Obosh, combining it with things like, I think like both of the abilities on Phoenix of Ash that are potentially mana intensive are helped by the banner. The Phoenix of Ash's haste and evasion is helped by the Heraldic Banner, right? Like it really fits together beautifully.
Yep. So if you're looking for, if you're of that persuasion, I still think the Urion deck is stronger, but if I do think this is a clean list. I'd play the fourth shock also, but I like the style.
Yeah, I mean the fourth shock isn't that big of an ask, right? Like the deck is very close to being, I think, where I'd like it. I don't know. What do you think about cutting Annex? I think Annex.
Definitely not. I'm not cutting Annex.
All right.
Nah, but that's also probably a leak. Because at the end of the day, this is a deck with this is 15 threes. And I know that you're an Obosh deck, so really some of your threes or fours and so on. But I mean, is it crazy to just cut the third Phoenix of Ash, man?
That was one of the ones I was thinking. But I've played a fair amount of Obosh Phoenix of Ash decks, which I'm sure is not surprising to you. Like, these decks are typically far, far less powerful than whatever is across the table from them. So you really need to get your damage in where you can get it on the angle you can get it. And Phoenix of Ash is often like, hey, I fly, I get around removal, I'm working hard here. That's.
So maybe I'm off the shock.
Yeah, I mean, well, the shock would literally be the weakest card in the deck, right? But it's very flexible, and the deck doesn't have a lot of removal spells.
So there's a different kind of red deck. It's back in the Rakdos space. Actually, it's not even Rakdos. I guess it's Jund, technically. The Burnosaurus 6th place Cauldron Familiar Witch's Oven deck. Obviously, we've talked about a million of these over the past year, but this one, the twist here is 3 copies of Bolas's Citadel in the main deck.
Wow, that's a dashing play. And so what kind of mana acceleration are we talking about to even get to 6? Gilded Goose and then Priest of Forgotten Gods works, right?
Definitely.
So
it works perfect.
So what are you using the Citadel for? Right, like
reach 10.
10?
I mean, first you get some value, then you get 10. When you're nickel and diming them with all the Mayhem Devils and the triggers from the cat, Bolas's Citadel gives you the second half, and it's pretty strong as a card draw engine, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine the 10. It's probably not very difficult to get substantial permanents, right? The Trail of Crumbs and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Just lining up permanents for you.
Yeah, plus food.
Yeah.
Food,
I don't mind that.
Dude, you can like claim the Firstborn a bunch of stuff, and then you sack it to your Bolas's Citadel.
I don't mind that at all. Do we have life? What's the life on this deck? We have
Food.
food and Cauldron Familiar, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, so I guess we have fuel. Maybe as far as Jund decks go, this is going to be the way to build it. I mean, historically, people were, casualties of warring at their 6, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a rough time for Casualties of War right now. Like so many people don't want to play permanents of any substance because of Agent of Treachery just being so ubiquitous. And once nobody's playing permanents worth stealing, it kind of bodes poorly for permanents worth destroying.
Yeah, even if you could get 6 of them, like you're just often in a situation where you're getting a land and then like one garbagey permanent, and we're like, was this really worth the investment?
Well, and it's not like people don't play permanents. It's just that everybody's permanents draw cards because they all want to blink everything with Yorion,
Yeah, that's true.
11 and me, the 7th place list. This is a different take on mono white. Talk to me what's going on here.
This is literally the next deck I wanna build and play in Standard. It's meaningfully different than everything else in Standard right now. And to be fair, this is like the opposite of the deck that I ever want to play. But I mean,
it's so much the opposite that it might be attractive to you, right?
It is so the opposite of every deck I ever want to play. So 11 and me's deck, mono white aggro, and I'm going to put like an asterisk.
That's not aggro.
An asterisk next to the
This
word
is not aggro. Dude, this is like a Boggles deck.
Yeah, 13 creatures, most of which are lifelink, right? And then just a ton of buff spells, right? So 18 enchantments, all that glitters, glaring aegis, Sentinel's Eyes. Man, Sentinel's Eyes, Patrick. Sentinel's Mark. And then it's got eight instants that don't just buff, but can potentially give some sort of protection or hexproof. So God's Willing, which can give protection from a color, and hexproof coming from Karametra's Blessing. So I was actually talking this deck out with one of my friends. I'm like, I think I'm going to try this deck out. He's just like, this is a non-reach weenie deck. How would you ever beat Lurrus? And I'm like, this seems like a great matchup against the Lurrus deck. So, well, how do you figure? This deck has 4 Alseid of Life's Bounty, 4 God's Willing, 4 Karametra's Blessing. Don't you just, like, trip up their big turn and then kill them? Right? Like,
well, also, your Lurrus is really good. Like you're a Lurrus deck, and when you can like Lurrus back a Stonecoil Serpent, that's kind of nice,
this
right?
Is cheating. So Stonecoil Serpent has a casting cost of X, and I wrote about this and I quoted you, and the quote that I'd said was, "Technically correct is the best kind of correct."
That's technically correct.
X is technically under the auspices of Lurrus of the Dream Den. However, this card is violently against the spirit of Lurrus of the Dream Den. I mean, this is like a 6 or something a lot of the time. So you're just like, all right, first of all, if they can even kill it, right? So you're...
This is not a trivial protection ability. Protection from multicolor is pretty good.
This is protection from Deafening Clarion, protection from Teferi, right? It's protection from every single companion that might try to block this thing, right? And it's also got like a bunch of abilities that actually happen to be super good in the format, right? If people are using Omen of the Sun to kind of chump block and set stuff up, you're just like, you just trample over 1/1s. So Stonecoil Serpent is really powerful here. And the thing that you are such a great Lurrus deck because of Alseid of Life's Bounty. Imagine the opponent has 2 different colors of blockers, right? Or 2 different colors of removal. You're just like, sacrifice Alseid of Life's Bounty, protection from black. Rebuy with Lurrus, Alseid of Life's Bounty, protection from red, for sake of argument, right? Like
you're careful about giving protection from white, but yes.
Yeah, maybe not protection from white, but against, well, you can sometimes, depends, you might still kill him. And now you just literally have a situation where you're like, all right, you're protection from their removal, probably protection from their blockers. You can, and for a really low amount of mana investment, slam all the enchantments onto this thing that you possibly want to, they're probably just dead. Right? So this deck is really, I feel like it has that infect vibe to it. That's what's attractive to me about this deck. So maybe all the things that I typically hate about Boggles, I love in this deck. And the thing is, like, this is just,
Well, it's so different than what people are playing in Standard right now.
It seems like it would get such a huge edge in some matchups. Like, all these creatures are just lifelink, right? We're just like, all right, I've got like Healer's Hawk, and let's say you're playing against like the red-white cycling deck. Like, that deck is extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily synergistic, but doesn't really have any point removal in game one, right? They're just like, you could just stack things onto the Healer's Hawk, and they could never race you. They're just like, attack with lifelink, attack again with lifelink, Lurrus, rebuy, buff, right? It's just attack, 8 lifelink.
I love that it's the Healer's Hawk in this deck that makes you feel like this deck is unbeatable.
Hushbringer, I'm a little curious why Hushbringer, there's only one of that one, and obviously it's the double cost Healer's Hawk, but Hushbringer just like does this like solo counter one of the dominant strategies in the format, which is like...
No, you're talking about Agent of Treachery?
Yeah.
It hurts that card, but it's not like Agent of Treachery is the only thing going on with those decks, you know?
No.
They can kill it. They even played the Omen of Fire.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, because it's only creatures entering the battlefield or dying that doesn't cause triggers, you know?
Yep.
But it is, at the end of the day, the next best Healer's Hawk.
But yeah, I think that the real secrets to this deck are Stonecoil Serpent just annihilates the rules around Lurrus of the Dream Den, and it's just a great card. It's great against Teferi, great against all the companions in terms of combat. You can just load it with enchantments and go to town. I think that the lifelink aspect is going to give you substantial edge in the red matchup and the cycling matchup. And I think that people are just going to underestimate this deck because when you're holding cards in hand, if one of them is a God's Willing or a Karametra's Blessing, the opponent might commit 5-7 mana to a big turn. You just counter it that turn, untap, and kill them immediately. Like that I think is the thrust of this deck. It's very exciting to me.
So is there anything in particular you would change, or are you just going to try it as is and see how it runs for you and modify from there?
I think that even at 21 lands, this is a little light on Castle Ardenvales. Like, we have a long precedent in, the last format and a half where red decks were playing approximately 20 lands. We're playing as many as 4 Castle Embereths. So I think one...
Yeah, but that's so much cheaper to use, right?
Yeah, but I was really thinking of, like, the utility on the first turn, that you have, like, a pretty high likelihood of just having a Plains.
That's a good point.
And so, like, every Castle Ardenvale after the first Plains is essentially free, right? So, yes, it's expensive to use relative to some other stuff, but its utility is extremely high, especially in a situation where you're a deck without reach. So, you really need a creature. But... depending on the situation, like, any creature might do, right? You might have, like, 3 enchantments in your hand. You make a token at the end of their turn. It lives, and then, all the glitters and Sentinel's Eyes go on it, and you attack them for lethal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that if there's one place that I would go to potentially try to improve this deck, which I think is super inventive to begin with, it'd be more Castle Ardenvales. And then out of the sideboard, I think I just want to play more Hushbringers. I think that there are enough... kind of 187 effects that some decks are trying to play. And obviously, they're fairly narrow, right? Like, that's not the dominant kind of strategy in Standard right now. But the cards are there. You might just get somebody. It was back. Remember Tocatli Honor Guard, your boy? Like,
yeah,
there were just mad.
Yeah, but I guess, but that's because energy was like.
I'm just saying, like, it seems like a relatively unassuming card, right? You're talking about a 1x creature for 2 mana. This is even worse for combat, right? Although it has flying and lifelink. But it just collapses certain strategies. Now, obviously, energy was super pervasive then. Tocatli Honor Guard had text against all kinds of stuff from Explore, Goblin Chain Whirlers, etc. later. But I think that the same thing is true in narrower situations, right? That those are not the dominant kinds of cards we're seeing in Standard, but that's why I think I would relegate it to the sideboard.
Okay. Dude.
Yeah.
Are you ready for, like, your day to be made?
I'm ready.
It looks like you were right, man. So if you look at the 13th place list,
lucky number 13.
Brad Hughes, yeah. So Brad Yu is playing the Yorion Jeskai deck, but he's playing they're playing the variant with 3 copies of Mythos of Aluna.
Yep.
And a gamer after your own heart has added 3 copies of Ketria Triome in order to potentially be able to actually do it. To be able to get the killer part so that you can give the Yorion that you copy, the ability to fight. And it's like, I just, I thought it was, it put a smile on my face to see the, it actually working out the way that you suggested.
Well, I think that's cool. And separately, Ketria Triome is a perfect card to play in the sense that it still taps for two usable kinds of mana that this deck wants, whether it's for its Omen of the Sea or for its Fires of Invention. And, worst comes to worst, you could just get rid of it with Cycling 3. So,
but that's they cut the Temple of Epiphanies, right?
Yeah.
So basically, what's going on here is that you're trading this.
Now.
You're sacrificing the scry on the way in, but you're picking up the option of being able to cycle later.
Yeah, we saw that with some Karuga decks a few weeks ago, where I thought it was stunning, right? Because I always thought that people wanted to play a lot of temples in those Fires of Invention decks because it would help them set up fires on turn 4 or help them set up the mana they required to get their game going. But it looks like Triomes are better. The other thing is, I think that because so many decks in Standard are these 80-card Yorion Fires kind of slow decks, you're planning for these long games, right? So if the games are not going to be over, back in the day, you're just like, all right, I land Fires, take a huge turn. Turn 5 is probably a gigantic turn. You might just kill them immediately. That's not how games in Standard are going right now, right? Like, people fight once Fires is in play. They've got Elspeth Conquers Death to answer the opponent's big permanent. They've got like the Lukka Coppercoat Outcast into Agent Treachery combos. So the games are not immediately over. At some point, you've got 6+ lands, 7 lands. You'd much rather be able to cycle than scry at that point. And, maybe your expectation is the games are going to go 20 turns.
Yeah. It seems reasonable. I mean, if you're going to stretch that long, having the extra option. Plus, you're playing an 80-card deck. You could afford to shrink it to 79 sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. Or, it may be as few as 77.
So, dude, on the topic of inventive technology, Phil Hellmuth's 18th place, let's just call it a Winota Neoform deck.
Is that what we're calling it? Because those are the cards? It's like 32 creatures and 4 Neoforms.
Yeah, so this blue, red, green, white deck brings together Gilded Goose, Hanged Executioner, Legion Warboss, Kenrith the Return King, Neoform, Agent of Treachery, Alarios Enraptured. So what's going on here is, to start with, you've got the Winota Joiner of Forces stuff going on, where you can, if you just have some creatures in play, you can just attack with stuff like, obviously Gilded Goose can get in there if you didn't have to use it to help cast the Winota.
Yep. Legion
Warboss can be the source of multiple non-human attackers. Hanged Executioner is multiple non-human attackers. Arboreal Grazer can get in there. And so all you're really trying to do is dig to Agent of Treacheries. And then the backup plan is that sometimes you go get something like Kenrith, the Returned King, as an extra human that's really good. Or here, it's kind of interesting. The use of Alarios Enraptured is actually kind of clever.
That's cool, yeah.
So it's a human in your deck, which means that it's another hit, right, for Winota. But when you play it, the creature you get up front that actually fights is not a human. It's a reflection. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I'm a very appreciative of Phil Hellmuth. Phil Hellmuth always seems to have a sweet brew in the MTGO deck lists.
Yeah.
This one's pretty cool. I when I was looking down at this list the first time myself, I was just like, my eye immediately went to the sideboard and looked for ones, and I was just like, which is the companion? I was like, and the companion is Lavinia Azorius Renegade, which is not a companion. But Forgotten Sweetness, right? So yeah, I think one of the things that I really think is appreciable about this deck is if you look at like the power to toughness ratios of some of the early non-human creatures. For example, Arboreal Grazer's an 0-3, Gilded Goose is an 0-2 flyer, Hanged Executioner is a 1-1 flyer. Like, they can kind of get in and kind of get away with it, even though they're early game creatures. You know what I mean? Right? Like, Hanged Executioner might live. That's like a lot of the time when you're setting up Winota, people are getting splattered.
Well, yeah, I mean, even if they kill the Executioner, you still have the 1/1 Spirit that also has flying.
But I'm just saying, right? Like a lot of the goose, when the goose is loose, Goose walks away a lot of the time, which I just thought it was a cool little bit of the deck.
Sure. What about the Irreverent Revelers? We don't see that too often in Standard.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher, but I guess maybe it doesn't have to be, right? So Irreverent Revelers is a 2/2 Satyr, medium draft card for 3 mana, and it has 2 abilities, destroy target artifact or gains haste until end of turn. So this card is like no worse than a Manic Vandal, right? Like a card I have been proud to play in many of
It's better than a Manic Vandal, right?
So sometimes it's a Sukata Lancer, and sometimes it's a Manic Vandal. It's not bad at all. Also, when
you're trying to destroy Witch's Oven, right? Like that's the thing.
Or whatever, a Bolas' Citadel sometimes, right? Or a food token.
That's true.
Any of that stuff. I think you're just fine. I think that if Irreverent Revelers is in your deck, there's 2 things about it that you might like. One of them is it's a hasty creature that you can help Winota set up. And then separately, any artifact that you might want to potentially blow up, you're probably happy to blow up.
Yeah, no, you talked me into it. Why don't you
about Fire Prophecy? This is a card.
Fire Prophecy's been making a comeback. Yeah, it was showing up in some of the Jeskai lists.
Yeah,
not that many of them, but some of them. I think you just having the efficient, like, you know how there's lots of times you sideboard some amount of cheap removal.
Yeah,
and you're like, yeah. So the reason to choose this one is, first of all, if 3 is the right number, because sometimes you need 4 for like depending on what kind of threats people are playing. But right now, so many people are doing things like playing Agent of Treachery, and lots of the creatures have 3 toughness, the ones that actually are around. But like so many things you have to kill are that, but also the selection from Fire Prophecy is just like a little extra oomph. And when you're dealing with a deck like this that has some dead draws, because it's not that you can't cast Agent of Treachery yourself, but man, do you draw some Agent of Treacheries that you can't cast. And so it's really helpful to be able to actually put them to work. It's a little disproportionately helpful in a deck like this.
Yeah, just get rid of them when they're in your hand. It seems fantastic because, I mean, it's like you said, it's not that you can't cast them, but this is a 24 land deck. I guess there are like 8 accelerationist creatures, but still, that's a slow grind.
What? And remember, though, this deck is it's a Neoform deck, too. So you can actually go turn 1 Goose, and then turn 2 whatever creature you're going to be wanting it to attack with, whatever creature you're going to want to sacrifice to Neoform, like whatever your 3-drop is. And then on the next turn, you can just Neoform your 3-drop and immediately attack with the Gilded Goose. And if your 3-drop happened to be the Executioner or Illyrios, even the Legion War Boss, because you're up the tokens.
Yeah.
So like
your value.
So whatever your 3-drop was, you're going to be attacking with 2 different non-humans on the 3rd turn. That's really fast.
Yeah.
This deck looks like it could be. This deck, are we sure this deck isn't busted?
It certainly has some angles. So I would say that the complexity level of this deck is pretty high. That's not bad, right? That means that it's rewarding. It has built-in ways to fix its bad draws, though. I think like the Fire Prophecy ability to get rid of those Agent of Treacheries I'm very attracted to. The other thing is this deck just plays a pretty good grind, right? Like Charming Prince, Illyrios, Hanged Executioner, and to some degree Legion War Boss play legitimate Magic the Gathering against people and just, all right, this is a card. you're gonna have to use a card on this. I know you're not gonna want to, and at some point they might be out. You're up one, and then all right, you're a Winota deck again. Also, Winota's a 4/4 for 4, and a lot of the time you were just talking about how Fire Prophecy might be sweet because it's 3. It's not the easiest creature to kill,
No. Plus, dude, if you get Winota flooded, you can Neoform your Winota away and go get a Kenrith.
Oh man, if you're in a situation like you're against like a removal poor deck like Simic or something, Kenrith might just beat them, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about Drannith Magistrate. This is the second deck in a row that sees one Drannith Magistrate in the sideboard.
Yeah, I don't know. It's more of it's like the one Hushbringer thing, It just rounds some stuff out. I don't know. When you put it down, I think it's like when you're trying to win the mirror, because like when you have a Drannith Magistrate, your opponent, actually, it doesn't even stop the Winota.
It doesn't stop Winota. It doesn't stop
just the companions, right?
Oh, that is good. Counter.
I'm trying to see if there's anything else really that you do, because it doesn't stop the Cauldron Familiar either, right?
No, it stops.
It's basically just all the companions.
Brockus, though, right? Is that the name of the kaiju that you can play out of your graveyard?
Yeah, and Uro and.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I think I would be happy to have a card that was just like counter the companions. That's not bad.
Yeah, and Uro. I mean, Uro's the real deal.
And Croxa.
Phoenix of Ash. It's Phoenix of Ash, sort of. I mean, not totally, but.
Yeah, you know what? This card is fine. I think it's.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes you got to just get a little funky on them. Put one card in there that gives them something to think about.
I think to some degree, this deck is exploiting the fact that aggro is not the top kind of deck that people are playing. Like, look at the mana base. You're talking like 4 Breeding Pool, 3 Hallowed Fountain, 5 Triomes, 2 Sacred Foundry, 4 Stomping Ground, 4 Temple Garden. I mean, you've got to be doing 12 damage to yourself with mana every game. This is no joke how much damage you're dealing to yourself. For sure you're dealing damage to yourself on turn 1, right?
Hopefully. Does the mono green deck, I think they put at least one copy in the top 32, Edel packing a mono green deck. Does this meet your bar for aggro, or is this just more of a ramp deck? Like, it's got some aggro elements, right? Like, this is like the an extension, like the evolution of that deck we talked about a month ago, a few weeks back, where you're using Migratory Greathorn and Gemrazor as part of your sort of ramping engine, but this one's less all in. Instead of like packing any of the 5 cost mutate cards, it's just real modest about its mutate package. And instead it gets a little extra. So it's got mana from Castle Garenbrig, but it's also just playing kind of a beatdown game with Stonecoil Serpent, Shifting Ceratops, Questing Beast, and it still has that Endrazor Forerunners top end.
I'm real medium on this deck. I played a lot of the Simic deck with the Migratory Greathorn, Arboreal Grazer kind of angle. I don't know why this seems like a Prime Directive thing to me. Like, I don't think I'm getting enough from Stonecoil Serpent to not play, the blue creatures, to not play like the high end mutates.
So the Prime Directive sort of theory that you've talked about, that's actually one of the, to me, I think quietly, just one of the most important things I've learned from you is the Prime Directive in the Magic context being the never play a bad something else. Like when you're talking about a deck that has a very specific niche that it's targeting, that it's something that it's trying to accomplish in the metagame, playing a different deck that's like clever or fancy, if it's not like it's actually better at that role, it's just different, what are you doing? And you're saying this isn't actually better, it's just different?
I don't think so. And there's one really big reason why I wouldn't play this deck. which is that the Simic deck, which is so similar, but obviously has more mutates and more explosive stuff because of the frog on turn 2. After sideboarding, this deck gains no Brazen Borrowers. The biggest thing that I found was when you were playing against the Jeskai Yorion deck, right? You're always in the situation where you had like some Migratory Greathorn with 14 mutates on it. You have massive amount of card advantage on the battlefield, but they could just flip the entire script on you with a single turn, right, of getting that Agent of Treachery. All you have to do is just like had a medium amount of advantage. They're forced into their whatever play they're going to have, and then when they go for the Planeswalker into Agent of Treachery play, you just Brazen Borrower their token, and then you win the game on the spot. This deck can't do that, right? That's the entire reason that you play the Simic deck, right? Like, Simic deck is hyper explosive in game 1. You win a lot of games just because you went first, and you went like first turn Arboreal Grazer into Migratory Greathorn, and no one can chase you. But the decks that actually do have play, right? The decks that have removal that can be effective against decks that are going wide. The decks that can just steal the creature that you've invested 4 pieces of cardboard in. This deck has no way to protect those investments.
Well, there's Barkhide Troll. So, it's not the greatest, but that's a little bit,
Yeah, I'm just saying, they're gonna take your guy that has like multiple mutates on it, and they're gonna have the biggest thing on the battlefield. Right?
That's pretty rough.
Right?
That's why you got to bring in the Nullhide Ferox.
At the end of the day, this deck is just guys. It gets 36 guys. None of the guys have anything special going on until you get to Endurance Forerunners. When you're at Endurance Forerunners, sure, yeah, all right, it's like a gigantic turn, awesome. But until that point, they're mostly creatures with power and toughness. Some of them have haste, right? Questing Beast has haste. Shifting Ceratops has haste. That's cool. But they're, they get wrath, they get stolen, they get blocked. So I think you need a little elegance because other people's permanents are at the top of the metagame. They're either getting you with Elspeth Conquers Death, they're blinking permanents like Elspeth Conquers Death with Yorion, or they're getting you with Agent of Treachery. And so if you didn't blow them out by going first and getting a sweet mana acceleration draw, which you can, admittedly, if you're actually playing in a mid game with them, this deck does not have the tools after sideboarding, in my opinion, to be able to defend itself.
Yeah, I agree, I guess, because I don't think I would play the Simic deck either, but I don't like not having ways to interact with some of the stuff that people are doing, in particular the Luca Yorion stuff.
I like the Simic deck. It depends what you're going for in your life. It's certainly very exciting to play. I don't know if it has the best win rate. Also, this has got to be like the worst Wicked Wolf deck I think I've ever seen.
Come on. Is that fair? I don't know, man.
It's not a good Wicked Wolf deck.
Briefly, wanted to actually touch on just a couple things in Pioneer. There was a Pioneer event on the 17th that had a couple things that are a little bit different than what we've seen, and one of them is weirdly the same but in a new context. So first, that same in a new context, 11 and me brought the Luca Yorion Agent of Treachery deck to Pioneer and put up a 10th place finish. It's what do you think of just bringing this deck to Pioneer?
I think that the cards are obviously clearly very powerful, right? And sometimes we don't know what is going to be good or not in larger formats until somebody tries it. Like that's the thing. I remember when it wasn't clear that Affinity was going to be good in Extended, right? That seems like a block deck to me. Like, all right, it was a block deck and it's also an insane Extended deck, it turns out. So I don't know, Yorion has more toys to play with, right?
Dude, here's something that's going to make you swoon. When you're playing against the Garuda deck, because the Garuda deck's much stronger in Pioneer than it is in Standard.
Well, because you get so many more cool creatures to play, right?
Right, and actually one of the new ones that people are playing is Wispweaver Angel, which is that old, draft card, 4/4 flyer, but it can blink something. So it blinks Garuda, and you keep doing your thing, right?
I like it.
But the 11 in me, they actually they can sideboard out Agent of Treachery and sideboard in 2 copies of Void Winnower, because that way when they Luca, they'll hit Void Winnower against a Garuda deck, and Void Winnower is that Eldrazi that's 9 colorless for an 11/9. Your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs. Your opponents can't block creatures with even mana costs. So when you play Void Winnower, they just can't cast spells anymore.
This wins the internet.
Isn't that so smart?
It's so elegant.
You've got Luca already. You've got the engine.
Yeah, I've wowed. Yeah.
And then Teo, the Shield Mage. That's pretty clever.
I've always loved Teo, the Shield Mage.
It even feeds into your engine, giving you something to Luca, you know?
Yeah, that's really cool.
And then there's another transformational sideboard plan, Resolute Archangel. Like if you're playing against a burn deck or something, having the ability to go back all the way, go all the way up, it's kind of nice having the option. So I just thought it was kind of interesting seeing some of, that kind of making its way over to Pioneer a little bit.
Yeah, so what are the key differences here, right? So 11 and Me has, I guess, way better mana, right? You have a ton of sweet mana that you can play. And then a lot of these are standard legal cards. Supreme
Verdict's pretty good.
A huge upgrade on Supreme
Oath of Chandra is excellent.
Oh, yeah. Oath of Chandra is even better than the Omen of the Forge. And it has a lot of friends in this deck. But a lot of the rest of the deck is it's close to standard legal, right?
Oh yeah. Yep. So then there was one other deck. We've already seen the stuff like the Heliod. Dude, I love a deck that just has 1 Lurrus in the main deck and 1 Yorion in the sideboard.
There's some deck I saw that was just like, I can't remember what companion it was. I think it was Kahira was the companion. And there were just like a ton of Karugas in the main deck. Just run Karuga. Kahira is the companion.
But it seems like Pioneer's doing all right. There sure is a lot of Planeswalker influence, I guess. But it does look like Mono Red's rising a little bit to try to help meet the challenge. We talked last week a little bit about the Yorion stuff with Treacherous Blessing and Doom Foretold and Demonic Pact.
Yeah, it's cool.
And it looks like the archetype has continued to evolve. Elspeth's Nightmare, part of the equation, and, just getting to use Flicker of Fate, loading up on Flicker of Fate in Final Payment. Anyway, I just thought it's interesting seeing this stuff continue to evolve because it doesn't look like, Yorion is a little bit prevalent, but it doesn't look too bad in Pioneer at the moment.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff all over the place. There was a weird red deck, actually. One of the red decks was just, a lot of stuff you'd expect, but then it would just splash Boros Charm. But the other red deck was a little more exotic.
15th place one?
Yes. Yeah, with On-Crop Crasher and Rampaging Ferocidon and Collective Defiance.
So
talk to me about Collective Defiance.
So
we don't see that one too often.
All those cards have something in common. On-Crop Crasher, Rampaging Ferocidon, and Collective Defiance all have in common that they have not seen a lot of play in very many formats before, but they are all 3 casting cost cards. To go with Obosh, the Prey Piercer. I gotta say, I kind of like this deck, right? So it's a little expensive for my taste, right? So
you'd add a few more 1s and cut a couple 3s?
Yeah, but it might be right. Look, I can't say definitively. There are kind of a lot of 3s for my taste, but this is also a 24 land deck. But to be fair, you can't play cards like Abbot of Carol Keep because of the casting cost, right, in this deck. So maybe that just becomes On-Crop Crasher, and it makes sense. Rampaging Ferocidon is a completely defensible card to be playing in Pioneer, and it has actually been a card that excels depending on the metagame, right? So players not being able to gain life just puts a huge stymie on, and certain strategies. If somebody's going to play Heliod or if they're going to play Kalidas, it's a pretty big game there. But those guys all work well with Obosh the Prey Piercer and Collective Defiance. Wow, this card I think I've mostly seen it in Legacy play, right? In terms of constructed viability, it was never a big presence in Standard, as I recall. So this card is a 1 RR for a sorcery. It's got Escalate, and you can do a bunch of stuff with it. You can discard all your cards and draw that many. You can deal 4 to a creature. You can deal 3 to a player, or opponent, rather. Or you can do them all. So
yeah, and you have to spend extra mana, 1 for each extra mode. So normally I think what's going on here is this is a 3 mana deal 4 to a creature or 3 to a player. With kicker 1, do them both.
Yep. That's an expensive way to get a Searing, but it's...
You got to do what you got to do, man. It deals 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Questing Beast is the real deal. You got to kill that guy.
One thing that I really, really like about this deck, though, I gotta say, 4 Shock, 4 Wild Slash. Gavin Wen was not messing around. The people who play 4 Wild Slash and no Shock, I very rarely take them seriously.
Dude, they've even got 3 Magma Sprays in the sideboard.
Yeah, not messing around.
Yeah.
So I like it. I think I would not mind playing around with this deck. Also, I love the not playing Torbrand. I think Torbrand is such a whack Pioneer card. It's weird to me that card sees even medium play. It just seems so slow. And I just like...
Well, once you're playing Obosh, that's one of the perks. You don't get tempted.
You can't play it. It's even, right? But you got big game here. Your Glorybringer in the sideboard, and one of my favorites for Pioneer Red.
The Scab Client.
Nope, I was gonna say Carry Zev's Expertise.
Oh, okay.
That card inflicts an amazing amount of chaos on people who are casting Niv Mizzet, who are relying on inverters for defense, Uros for defense. You can often just kill somebody on the spot. You take their 6/6. Obviously, you're hasting over into the red zone with it. Sometimes doing something horrendous because it has an extra durability. And you're, hurling a burn spell or a haste creature out at the same time. So
yeah. The fact that it calls out 2 or less, but 1 is 2 or less.
1 is less than 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So getting that free, the free mana at the to top it all off, to either have a Bomat Courier or a Shock as the icing on the cake. I'm into it.
Yeah. One thing I would say that it is not in conflict with playing Obosh is I'm not the biggest fan of Grafsdigger's Cage. I prefer Soul Guide Lantern. Soul Guide Lantern is just outstanding in Pioneer because of the, maybe it's less popular now, but it's very good against Uro. And it's very good just as a persistent thing that kind of sit there in some matchups. Like you could just have it in play against inverter decks, and it can potentially change their play pattern. So I like that a lot. I think it's not meaningfully more expensive than Grafsdigger's Cage, and sometimes you just use it to draw a card and kill them with a burn spell. So, So that's one tweak I might make, but I don't mind this deck at all. I actually kind of want to try to get behind On-Crop Crasher.
That's exciting.
I think On-Crop Crasher is one of those cards you're just like, this is not a great card. It was only medium popular in Standard, and I was like, well, does that mean that it has a real future in Pioneer? It's really different, right? Like, a 3 power haste for 3. It's not the worst. I mean, you look at this, you're like, it's kind of in shock range for a 3 mana card, but it does have some compelling text if you want to kill somebody that turn.
Yeah,
it's fantastic against one big blocker.
Okay, dude, what's your deck of the week?
I really like the Yorion deck from Pioneer that you talked about, just because of that Void Winnower tech seems fantastic. It's so clever.
That was I'll give that one as my favorite piece of technology. But for the deck, I don't know. Am I weird? I still, it's probably miserable to play against, But I kind of like the Neoform Winota deck.
So that one, I think miserable to play against is a feature, not a bug. I don't know. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that one because I think I'm scared of the mana base. You're taking a lot of damage. I think got to be 12, right? From your own mana. On the flip side, the deck that I'm definitely going to try, that I'm definitely going to play
Mono
this
white?
week is mono white. So
Yeah, that one's smooth. Yeah, I like that one. Well, awesome, dude. Companion round of companion bans. Is this 2? Yeah. I guess they sort of. So we'll see which companions they ban next in companion ban bingo. All right. See you next week, dude. Bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, so jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber.